The United States, Japan, and Australia are planning a joint Navy drill in the South China Sea off the western Philippines this week to underscore their commitment to the rule of law in the region after a recent show of Chinese aggression in the disputed waters. Filipino security. On August 5, Chinese Coast Guard ships used water cannons against Philippine vessels in the contested waterway, where disputes have long been regarded as a potential flashpoint and have become a fault line in the rivalry between the U.S. and China in the region. The drill will include 3 aircraft and helicopter carriers sailing together in a show of force and undertaking joint drills. Their commanders are set to meet with Filipino counterparts in Manila after the offshore drills, 2 Philippine security officials told. Both spoke on condition of anonymity because they are not allowed to publicly discuss details of the planned drills. The U.S. plans to deploy an aircraft carrier, the U.S. America, while Japan would send one of its biggest warships, the helicopter carrier GS Izumo. The Royal Australian Navy would send its HMAS Canberra, which also carries helicopters, one of the 2 officials said, adding that the joint drill was planned a few months ago. The Philippines would not be part of this week's drills due to military logistical limitations, but is open to becoming a participant in the future, the official said. The United States, Japan, and Australia were among several countries that immediately expressed support for the Philippines and concern over the Chinese action following the tense standoff earlier this month. Philippine officials said 6 Chinese Coast Guard ships and 2 militia vessels blocked 2 Philippine Navy-chartered civilian boats taking supplies to the Philippine forces stationed at the Second Thomas Shoal. One supply boat was hit with a powerful water cannon by the Chinese Coast Guard, while the other managed to deliver food, water, fuel, and other supplies to the Filipino forces guarding the shoal, the Philippine military said. The Chinese Coast Guard acknowledged its ships used water cannons against the Philippine vessels, which it said strayed without permission into the shoal, which Beijing calls Renai Jiao. In order to avoid direct blocking and collisions when repeated warnings were ineffective, water cannons were used as a warning. The on-site operation was professional and restrained, which is beyond reproach, the Chinese Coast Guard said. China will continue to take necessary measures to firmly safeguard its territorial sovereignty. The Philippine military said on Saturday that it would again attempt to deliver basic supplies to its forces in the Second Thomas Shoal, but didn't provide further details. The mission to the shoal is a clear demonstration of our resolve to stand up against threats and coercion, and our commitment in upholding the rule of law, the Armed Forces of the Philippines said in a statement. Following the incident, Washington renewed a warning that it is obliged to defend its longtime treaty ally if Philippine public vessels and forces come under armed attack, including in the South China Sea. Biden also explicitly condemned threats from North Korea, including cryptocurrency money laundering and potential arms transfers to Russia to assist in its invasion of Ukraine. Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, this is the first summit I've hosted at Camp David as president. I can think of no more fitting location to begin the next era, our next era of cooperation, a place that has long symbolized the power of new beginnings and new possibilities, Biden said. In the joint statement, Biden, Kishida, and Yoon affirmed the 3 countries' trilateral partnership at what they called a time of unparalleled opportunity for our countries and our citizens, and at a hinge point of history when geopolitical competition, the climate crisis, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, and nuclear provocations test us. This is a moment that requires unity and coordinated action from true partners, and it is a moment we intend to meet together. Japan, the Republic of Korea, and the United States are determined to align our collective efforts because we believe our trilateral partnership advances the security and prosperity of all our people, the region, and the world, the statement reads. In the joint statement, the 3 leaders also expressed concerns about actions inconsistent with the rules-based international order, which undermine regional peace and prosperity. While singling out the dangerous and aggressive behaviors supporting unlawful maritime claims that we have recently witnessed by the People's Republic of China, PRC, in the South China Sea. And on North Korea, the 3 leaders reaffirm our commitment to the complete denuclearization of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, in accordance with relevant UNSC resolutions and urge the DPRK to abandon its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. We strongly condemn the DPRK's unprecedented number of ballistic missile launches, including multiple intercontinental ballistic missile (ICBM) launches and conventional military actions that pose a grave threat to peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and beyond, the statement says. We express concern regarding the DPRK's illicit cyber activities that fund its unlawful DOMD and ballistic missile programs. The gathering at the secluded, wooded retreat highlights Biden's mission of reinvigorating alliances in the wake of the tumultuous 4 years of his predecessor, a key argument from Biden's 2020 campaign that's extending into his re-election bid. From the start of his administration, Biden has sought to draw Asian allies like Japan and South Korea closer, in part, to counter China. Biden's first foreign leader visits at the White House were Japan and South Korea, and he visited the countries back-to-back in May 2022. The leaders held trilateral meetings on the sidelines of last year's NATO summit in Madrid and at the G7 in Hiroshima in May, but the Camp David gathering was the first standalone summit for the three leaders. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has held yearly meetings with his Japanese and South Korean counterparts, beginning with a sit-down in Annapolis, Maryland, less than 3 months into Biden's time in office. Biden has worked to foster his individual relationships and cooperation with South Korea and Japan. Biden and Kishida have touted efforts to strengthen their country's military alliance, and the two men have worked closely as the U.S. has sought to rally allies against Russia's war in Ukraine. On Friday, Biden thanked Kishida for his leadership from day one on the response to Russia's invasion, which he said was critical for making it clear that the consequences for war extend well beyond Europe. If my memory serves me, well, I think it does. Mr. Prime Minister, we found ourselves in a circumstance where, when I called you about Ukraine, I didn't have to convince you of anything, Biden said. During a state visit for South Korea at the White House in April, Biden and Yoon announced a new agreement to deter North Korean aggression, including a U.S. commitment to temporarily deploy a nuclear-armed submarine to South Korea for the first time since the 1980s. The visit also included memorable personal touches as South Korea's president serenaded dinner guests with a verse from American Pie. The president in return gifted Yoon a guitar signed by the musician responsible for the song, Don McLean. Yoon's father, Yoon Ki-jung, passed away on Tuesday, just days before the South Korean president was set to travel to the U.S. Despite the current closeness of all three nations, the White House has been mindful of potential rollbacks to this progress under future administrations in all three countries. During Friday's news conference, Biden rebuffed the suggestion that his fellow leaders should be worried about the U.S. commitment to the Indo-Pacific, given former President Donald Trump's comments suggesting he'd seek to reduce America's footprint in the region should he win the 2024 election. This isn't just about one summit. What makes today's different is it's actually launching a series of initiatives that are actually institutional changes in how we deal with one another, Biden said.